Hi, I'm David with EV World News. Talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm on a Friday edition with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going, Bill?
Going good. Thank you, sir.
We're still in Earth Day week, right?
We are. We do Earth Day Omaha tomorrow. So
Oh,
I'll be
okay.
over. I'll be over there with the Bolt, and if you happen to live in Omaha and stop by there in Elmwood Park, come over and see us. We've got, I think we've got something like 10 EVs or something that are lined up to put on display.
Nice, nice. Well,
Probably Ron will be there. I think with his Cybertruck.
mhm.
Again. So we'll have a I think there's a Volkswagen iBuzz that'll be there, and of course, the usual Leafs and Bolts and Teslas and things like that.
Nice, nice. How late does that run tomorrow?
Oh, let's see. I think we start around something like around 11 o'clock noon and runs till like 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
Okay, okay. Let's see here. All right, so let's start out with discussing Tesla earnings. So Tesla reported a strong quarter one 2026 results. They beat expectations with 22.7 billion in revenue, which was 16% growth year over year, and a 41 cent earnings per share. I think their anticipated or expected was 35 cents. So hitting 41 was above expectations. So that
Hmm.
was good. But despite beating that, shares struggled as CEO Elon Musk announced a significant increase in 2026 CAPEX.
$25 billion worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really funny. People start talking nowadays in just numbers that have extra zeros. Like we talk, like I've heard Mike Herzog talk about the fact that it used to be if somebody was doing a 20 megawatt project, that was considered to just be massive energy project. Although a lot of your coal-fired facilities and other things like that, they're all 300-400 megawatts. But still, if you were going to put in something like manufacturing, you need more than 20 megawatts. It was a big deal. And now people with data centers are talking about gigawatts.
Yeah.
And here in this, when we're talking about a SpaceX um, IPO at 1.75 trillion, some of these numbers are just getting astronomical. But even here,
Uh, Yeah, well, how did they put it back? What exuberant expectations or something like that? This was like 20, 30 years ago, and they're talking about the stock market getting hyped. I think that was before the internet bubble, the exuberance or something or another. Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing here. I mean, okay, Artemis successfully took 4 people out around the moon and back.
Mhm.
That's remarkable. That's not a Tesla project. That's a government project.
Right.
Um, so why are we thinking that SpaceX is going to be worth that kind of money? I mean, Elon. By the way, I just saw a thing where Elon is backing off of the orbiting data centers idea. Apparently, so I don't know. Why do you think that's going to be a moneymaker like the internet or like electric cars or uh, SpaceX and Saddle Starlink? And I don't know.
Starlink is probably the crown jewel there, in my opinion. I mean, they've already got 11 or 10,000 satellites. It's
Oh
almost
yeah,
11,000 satellites.
crazy.
They're
It
gonna
wants
they're
to
gonna
put more.
they're gonna put 40,000 total just
Where,
for Starlink.
whose heads are those things going to come down on someday? I mean, they don't stay up forever,
Yeah.
right? They slowly degrade because there is enough atmosphere above the atmosphere to begin to slow them down and they
Mhm.
eventually come to Earth. Now, presumably they get burned up, but I guess we're wondering now what's going to happen with the Amazon's Jeff Bezos, booster
Yeah.
that didn't get the satellite into orbit, and that thing's a monster. So, and we don't know where that thing's going to come down. So, I don't know. I'm reminded of the movie. Oh, come on, what's the little robot? Um, oh, doggone it. Anyway, it's a Disney
Lost in
movie.
space.
What's that? No, no, no. It's a Disney movie about the little robot. that has finally sees the return of mankind after mankind abandoned the earth, but the whole earth is just cluttered with crap around it. So,
Wally.
thank you very much. I appreciate that, Orange Crush Wally. Yeah, it's how much stuff can we put up there? And you know where the SpaceX business is going to be? I think it's going to be in junk collection.
In space.
Removing debris out of space and bringing it back and then repurposing it for something God knows what in the future. But yeah.
Well, I know they make decent revenue off of all of the other everybody else's satellites they take up there. So, they figured out how to do things NASA used to do for a tenth the price.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. And I think I read where the latest mission, what is it, Starship 12 or whatever, that I think that they're going to planning on orbiting that and then bringing it back to the launch site off the coast, Texas coast. That would be remarkable. So yeah, if they can figure that out and make that successful, okay, it might be worth $1 trillion. Probably not in space travel. I don't know if I mean, what are the qualifications to be a passenger to sign up and have a boarding pass on a SpaceX Starship, right?
Yeah.
It'll take you to Australia in 45 minutes or something.
Sometimes when we look at different things Musk does, it's hard to really see where some of the financial value is. Like when people talk about Tesla, they only think about cars. They don't think about battery storage or solar or other businesses.
Or his big money maker, which used to be credits.
Yeah, tax credit or carbon credits.
Carbon credits and
Yeah,
tax credits and things. Yeah.
and tax credits and things like that. And they also sell insurance data. So they have all these things where they make money from. But here's something kind of interesting. Services, recurring services rose 42% to $3.75 billion, driven by booming full self-driving subscriptions, which reached 456,000 active users. And that's a big chunk of money.
That's a fairly fair chunk of money, and
Yeah.
I guess he's going to be making a whole lot more because all of the version 3 cars with the self driving are all going to have all their computers replaced. If you want the
Well, you and I were discussing this. I was
right,
talking about I'm looking for a hardware 4 because
yep,
it has 5 times the computing power and the camera technology is way better in the hardware 4 than it is in the hardware 3.
yeah. I saw an article where Mercedes and who is the other company are now realizing that quote Elon was right that you don't need to depend on lidar once you get your camera technology or whatever up to the point to where Tesla is at the moment.
Yeah, I read some articles on it, but I don't think I understood it well enough to be able to defend it in an argument.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I left it. And that's the case in a lot of things. I know enough that I need to get somebody else to have that discussion rather than me. Tesla raised its CAPEX guidance to $25 billion from a previous $20 billion, causing investor concern about near-term cash burn. They're putting almost all of this into AI, robotaxis, and robotics, signaling a pivot towards autonomous technology over traditional vehicle growth. We had all these things where Stellantis lost $19 billion and Ford and Chevy had all these massive write-downs. And, for Tesla to be putting money like this, it's like, well, they seem, it's one of these things. There's only one thing you can really fault Elon for much, and I think that's the fact that he gives these ambitious time spans, and which maybe if everybody worked like him,
definitely optimistic time span.
If everybody worked like Elon, they could probably hit him. The problem is you can't get everybody else to work like him.
Well, yeah. So I don't know. Did you see that the Roadster 2, which we've been waiting for what, like 10 years, something like that?
Yeah.
Will be the last manually driven car, according to Elon. He's
Hmm.
going to, there's no robotics, there's no AI to drive the car. At least I may have other things, but to drive the car will not be. That will be a driver only car, and it will be the last one ever produced. Because
Hmm.
all other cars by all other brands will all be driven autonomously. Which I guess as I get older and I get to the point to where the state doesn't want to give me a driver's license again, I'll probably be good with that. But in the meantime, we'll see. I kind of enjoy being able to control where I go. But anyway,
Right. Right. Um, Musk is emphasizing a rebound in demand in North America and preparations for a large-scale Optimus robot factory. Gross profit margins improved to 21.1%, up from 16.3% in quarter one of 25. Energy storage revenue slipped 12% year over year, which is interesting because I hear all the time about their battery system sales, but I'm suspecting as batteries get cheaper, you know, so they may have sold more batteries, but
but
they
the
sold,
margin is less. Yeah.
yeah. So that's a pretty big jump. Um, let's see. Cybercab production starts, bypasses federal 2,500 unit cap. Cybercab production officially began at Giga Texas, avoiding the NHTSA's 2,500 vehicle exemption cap by self-certifying to all FMVSS standards. Tesla can scale unlimited production without waiting for Self-Drive Act to pass, which would raise the cap to 90,000. One major problem, Tesla's supervised robotaxi fleet, supervised, still crashes at 4 times the rate of humans, one per 57,000 miles versus one per 229,000 miles.
Yeah.
Um,
None of them, to our knowledge, none of them have been fatal or, uh,
no,
yeah,
no, they've all been just really minor fender benders. And a
yeah.
lot of times they've been in the accidents and they weren't the vehicle moving.
The other one, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how you can claim that. 3 senior Cybercab leaders have departed since February, leaving no original program managers.
Ouch.
Yeah, but who knows? If you've been working at Tesla, it opens the doors to so many places. So there's so many
Yeah, I
startups.
guess it would. Yeah, I guess it would be nice to have that on your resume. You just hang out your shingle and say, "Yeah, I worked on these advanced, whatever it was, programs at Tesla." You probably find yourself getting some very nice
I,
recruitment bonuses.
I've been talking to some people in the AI consulting space, and they all have been under A16Z. They've been working for A16Z, which is Andreessen Horowitz. Saying you work for Mark Andreessen is just a huge, huge deal.
Yeah,
You know,
I
and
remember Mark when he was just starting things up.
yeah, but you
Uh,
know what I mean. It's
yeah.
a big deal coming from
Oh, yeah.
something like that. Elon Musk used SpaceX as his personal piggy bank, according to the New York Times. Now, this is kind of funny. I mean, he owns SpaceX, but Musk borrowed 500 million from SpaceX between 2018 and 2021 at interest rates of only 1 to 3%, far below
Well,
market rates.
sure. Why
Um,
not?
SpaceX also loaned money to Tesla, Solar City, and bought struggling AI venture XAI. Some investors, including Peter Thiel's Founders Fund, concerned Musk prioritizes personal interests over shareholders. Only possible because SpaceX is private. Such loans are prohibited at public companies.
Yeah.
It's kind of a fascinating discovery, but despite all that, people still feel it's worth $1.75 trillion.
Yeah.
And this all happened,
I'm not
2021,
putting any money
5
in
years
that
ago.
direction. I'll probably
Yeah.
regret it, but I'm not putting any money in that
Oh
direction.
God, I'm in these family office chats. People are always constantly in there asking if there's still a way, if anybody has access for them to get in at the last $1.25 trillion valuation before it goes live because they think it's going to be worth even more. A lot
Well,
of them just think that when it goes
well,
live, it'll shoot up even
yeah,
more.
they may be right. I'm not that big a thinker, unfortunately, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Here's another fun one. AI data centers. Now, this is a little bit further out. Mike and I have been talking a lot about how much energy we need by 2028, but by 2035, data centers alone will need 106 gigawatts of new power. Now, if you were going to do that in solar, you'd need at least 7 times that amount. Okay, because solar's,
Right.
inefficient. So you need 700, probably 800 gigawatts of solar for that. It's okay. So adding 106 gigawatts for data centers is equivalent to adding 20 plus New York cities. It's funny. You know, we're not really deep since electricity is just electricity. It's not like a metric system or or the U.S. System for numbers or whatever. But I remember by 2038, 2028, we're going to be short the equivalent of Canada's power needs. Okay. And here this one is in terms
And,
of New York cities.
and is any of that factoring in the bottleneck that's being caused right now and going to have long-term impact from the closing of the Straits of Hormuz?
No, this is just the US.
No, but what I'm saying is that impact, what's
Mhm.
going on there has global reach and global impact. So if you're making a projection, you're basing that on a world where there's still trade going on and things are good and ships are flowing and moving back and forth. But if you've got this situation where you've got 1,000 or more, tanker ships bottled up and going nowhere, right?
Mhm.
And you got what I think they're saying California is going to be out of jet fuel here in about 6 weeks, and Europe's having the same
Oh,
problem.
wow.
What is that? What is that going to do to those pre Hormuz projections? Right.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah,
it'd be nice to think that they decide that, okay, we're done, we're happy, we won, whoever we is, we won, and we're all going back to square one. Well, you can't go back to square one because it'll take, decades to be able to get back to where we were before we blew, pardon my French, shit up.
yeah. I remember seeing something that um if the United States doesn't release the blockade, Iranian oil, their wells will it'll take months to restart them.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the thing is, though, is that I heard that you had what 11 Iranian oil tankers slipped through the blockade. Now, the way they do that, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they're while all the cargo oil and that oil coming out of the Persian Gulf, which the Iranians, yeah, I guess that's we call it the Persian Gulf, and now they're calling the Strait of Hormuz, they're calling it the Persian Strait. But anyway, there is a port down near the Pakistani border
Mhm.
which is open. There, they're running the blockade runs from the Strait of Hormuz or off the Strait of Hormuz down in I guess Yemen, and then it's running up to the Pakistani Iranian border. That's the line of
Mhm.
which they're supposedly blockading with our ships. But there is an 11-mile national territory water from the coastline 11 miles out. And these tankers can navigate that 11-mile stretch of water and ride that all the way down the Pakistani coast and all the way down the Indian coast. And we can't do anything about it because we obviously don't want to send warships
Mhm.
into Pakistani national waters or into Indian waters to interdict those tankers. So they figured out a way to get around it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, still, who knows what that's going to lead to? When you talk about
Yeah.
the jet fuel, that's kind of
That's a real. That's a if they run out in Europe. I mean, I'm watching a number of different commentators, some with aviation experience, some with marine experience, things like that, and they're saying that's going to be a real problem because if you can't get jet fuel for people, either the government or private industry or individuals to conduct business, how are you going to do it? Go back to sailing ships?
Well,
A
we
lot, maybe
certainly
a lot of Zoom calls and things like that you can compensate for. And then they're telling a lot of people stay home. In Europe they're saying stay home. And I think over in China they're doing the same thing. They're telling their workers stay home, conserve gas, conserve fuel.
Yep, yep. Well, it's a real issue right now.
Yep.
But back to the data center needing 106 gigawatts. This is US only. Political roadblocks, tariffs, permitting red tape, and long grid connection waits are holding back renewables. Natural gas turbines face rising costs and supply chain bottlenecks. So currently, all gas turbines, new ones, are sold out production for the next 5 years,
Yeah.
and they're selling for 3, 4 times what they were.
Yeah,
And
I saw a number on what was that number? It was a large number for a gas turbine. I'll just say that.
Caterpillar makes gas turbines, and they're doing amazingly well because of the resurgence of need for gas turbines. Um, so there's actually some human capital constraints, not enough bankers and engineers to execute all projects, which I find that kind of
Bankers,
fascinating. Said bankers, yeah, bankers. A shortage of bankers to execute on
bankers, a shortage of bankers, huh? What?
that.
I guess what? Just to write the deals and
Yeah, this is from Bloomberg. This is coming from Bloomberg NEF. I
yeah,
don't,
new
you know,
energy finance. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I find that kind of fascinating. But I will tell you, um, like yesterday, I was talking to somebody who's looking to sell a building to be a data center in Florida, and I'm like, hey, I'm doing some energy projects in the next county. If you need energy, I can maybe help you get some. Can't get you all of it, but you got.
Right.
He was talking about how great the transmission lines are they've got at this property, and that's one of the reasons why people want data centers there. It's
Yeah,
like,
that's
yeah, that's great.
important.
You can have all the transmission lines in the world. Where are you getting the power from?
Where are the electrons coming from? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you can transmit if somebody will sell you power, right? Yeah, so that's a real issue. Let's
Speaking
see.
of energy, by the way, we are right now. I like to do this because we're here in Nebraska. Just so everybody's aware of the fact, we are when you combine the renewables output on the western part of the Southwest Power Grid and on the eastern part of the power grid, we are at 52% renewables or zero carbon uh, energy. 52%, not bad.
No, not at all. Um, it's always interesting looking at that because it depends on the time of the day, right? Or not,
Oh well, yeah. If
or
when I
the wind
looked this
blowing.
morning at sunrise, there was zero solar
Right, right.
on the western part of the grid, but now the solar, I didn't write the exact number down, but the solar's, there we go, is up quite a bit. Now I think the orange part is the solar, right?
Yeah. Well, we don't really have, you know, major solar in
No, no,
Florida.
on the western side.
Yeah, the orange is solar.
Yeah, and that this morning was zero when I first checked it. So yeah, it obviously the sun has come up over the Rockies, and now we're generating power. So
Yeah. Um, it's interesting here that because yellow is natural gas, and it's just
right,
funny, just a sliver here in the west, but it's going strong in the east. Um, but what do you got? Oh, coal over here is the light blue, and we got hydro is the big blue though. The dark blue is hydro.
yeah,
I guess the
that's
water's flowing in the west.
water's flowing in the west. Thank you, Grand Coulee.
Yeah.
I actually got to go there. I've been to the Grand Coulee. That's pretty cool.
We don't run any diesel over here in the east, but they're running some diesel for some reason over in the west. Got to
Yeah.
wonder what that's for. Must be something going on there, but
Probably for some, I would imagine for some type of industrial, I don't know what, but I wouldn't think anything else would justify that unless it's a small, maybe, I don't know, reservation power.
Well, here's a random question of the day. How successful do you think Aptera will be?
Oh God, I want them to go gangbusters, but boy, it's been a long uphill fight. They've been through bankruptcy twice. I hope you realize that.
Yeah, I get so much when I say anything. I can't say anything right or wrong about Aptera without getting criticized. So,
Yeah, I mean,
um,
I love the idea. I really wouldn't even mind having it available. I don't know if I'd want it all the time, but having a car like that available, it's just so dang cool. But you know,
yeah,
will it be successful? I hope so, but I don't know. We just have to see how time and tides move the thing.
yeah. All right. So, Iran Hormuz crisis exposes fossil fuel vulnerability, pushing nuclear to the top of energy security agenda. Global data center electricity demand projected to rise from 415 terawatt hours to 945 terawatt hours. So that's a little bit more than doubling by 2030. U.S. plans $80 billion to build 10 AP1000 large scale reactors, tech giants signing nuclear power deals for data centers. About 60 nuclear reactors are currently under construction globally. SMR is gaining traction for co-location with data centers. I've noticed several jobs that Kiewit. So Kiewit formed a nuclear construction division last year,
Oh
and
yeah,
they're doing the Oklo reactor at the Idaho National Labs. And I saw something where Kairos is going to use them for their Hermes 2 reactor, which of course they can't get any fuel for, but they're going to go ahead and start the construction of it. And Kiewit's got that job too. So I thought that was
oh that's interesting.
Kiewit's an Omaha company.
Right.
No. So, anyways, nuclear is no longer is it's no longer just base load. It's becoming the preferred solution for 24/7 AI power. Small modular reactors could transform distributed energy.
It's
I
a
think.
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one of the biggest things is the fact that with the small modular reactors, as they keep, because they're so much smaller than a traditional nuclear power plant, you can locate them on the data center's property or the manufacturer's property. And so you're not dealing with transmission costs. And there's just a lot of things it solves. Like I've got somebody I'm talking to that's got 3,000 acres of land under option for a data center, but that would only provide about 500, 600 megawatts of solar, which at 14% efficiency isn't really, it's kicking out maybe 60 megawatts or so at best, 50, 60 megawatts of energy equivalent to LNG or nuclear.
Yeah.
And so you have all that space, but the SMR takes up the, size of a football field. Okay. So you're not really talking, which is still a little bigger than an acre, about an acre and a third.
One third the length of a super tanker.
There you
I
go.
just I just learned that these super tankers are typically 3 football fields in length. Think about that, 3 football fields in length. So basically, one of those would take up the space of a single, super tanker.
Yeah. And, I, I think Aptera works in the right spot. I mean, obviously, I think they have a market. You've got all kinds of people who've pre-ordered the damn thing that just make them. Just make the damn things.
Well,
You've got people who want them. I know people who have deposits on them, and they're all hopeful they're eventually going to get them. Anyways, let's see. Clean power met all global electricity demand growth in 2025.
mm-hmm.
Solar became the leading source of new power generation supported by battery storage at scale. In China and India, fossil generation declined even as demand grew, which I find that kind of fascinating because both of those countries are adding coal plants. So somehow their fossil generation declined even with growing demand.
Well,
Renewable,
there's only so much coal you can make, right? I mean, the
yeah,
hills of
renewable.
Appalachia are riddled by mines that no longer are cost effective to produce coal, right? And
Mhm.
which is why some people thought, well, if we plug them up, then we can store either natural gas or carbon dioxide or compressed air, right, down in those things. So that's the point. Fossil fuels are a limited resource. Now, limited in whose lifetime? Well, not necessarily mine, but certainly within the limits of a community that was once prospering and growing, and guys were coming home I've lived there. I've lived in the middle of the coal fields. I know. So that they had a brief period of prosperity, and now you go there and they're just empty ghost towns
So
because that resource runs out.
we talk about the fact that petroleum is used for things other than power generation, right?
Oh, it would
So it's
make so
used to
much
make
more
plastic,
sense to do that.
right? It makes so much. But coal, besides being used for energy, is critical in the production of steel.
Oh
Without
yeah,
coal,
coke.
you can't make steel,
Yep.
and there's a finite amount of coal. And if we use up all the coal for energy, then it's going to cause a problem at some point in the creation of steel for
Yep.
building things.
Yeah,
Um,
that was one of the again, having I lived in Bluefield, well, I lived in Princeton, but Bluefield, West Virginia, which is the heart of the coal mining industry in West Virginia, and there was two things: you either made coal that was shipped out to power plants, or you made coal to coke, so that you could take and sell that coke then to the steel making companies in Pittsburgh.
right, right. Renewables overtook coal globally for the first time in the past year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
we
you just look at you look at the chart that we were showing you earlier, the Southwest Power Grid. Look how much of that is coal. It's a fraction, right? At one time, that could have been 50, 60%. Now it's just a fraction. In fact, at one time, it probably would have been 70 or 80%, and the rest of it was, would have been maybe coal oil and wood. But now it's just gets smaller and smaller as we move further away from it.
Are there different grades of coal, of thermal or metallurgical?
Yeah,
Probably.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think there is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not geologists, Anton, but
No.
um, it's an interesting question, but it is definitely limited. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit. You and I were, I don't know if we were talking about it on the show or before we started talking on the show today, but we were talking about sodium ion batteries and
Yeah.
other types of
Before.
batteries. It was
Yeah.
probably before we went live. A lot of
Right.
times, Bill and I, the show will start late and we're talking on stuff we probably should be talking about on the air, but we're going ahead and
Yeah.
having a conversation about things going on in the industry. And somehow it doesn't make it on the show. Well, anyways, this is from MIT Technology Review. Sodium ion batteries now only cost $59 per kilowatt hour. I was telling Bill that lithium ion is somewhere in that $70 a kilowatt hour. So when you look at 100 kilowatt hour battery on a car, that's only $7,000. Now that's a manufacturer's cost. That's not what it costs you to go get one. That's what
Right.
it costs to manufacture. Sodium ion is $59 a kilowatt hour. So that
Hmm.
is even cheaper, but
Yep.
it's not as energy dense.
No.
So you're going to have a smaller battery, or I was going to say you're going to have less energy. So maybe you have a 60 kilowatt hour battery in a car, which would still get you plenty of range. I mean, still
Yeah.
get you, 250 miles range probably, but that battery only costs about $3,600. And LFP lithium is now down to $52 a kilowatt hour. I didn't realize that LFP had dropped that much.
And explain what LSP is.
Um, Lithium ferrous phosphate.
Oh,
So
lithium. Oh,
lithium,
F. Okay. Yeah.
well,
LFP. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. What was I speaking with a lisp?
Yeah. You were speaking
I
with a
talking
little. I
like
thought
Mike
you were saying
Tyson.
S. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
S.
talking like
L.
Mike
Okay.
Tyson. Although you don't dare ever tell Mike Tyson he's speaking funny, right? Anyways, but the gap is closing as lithium prices actually are starting to rise, apparently, which I find that kind of fascinating. Cattle is launching the first sodium ion EV passenger cars in the middle of this year. Once again, it says ideal for shorter range vehicles.
Yeah.
Solid state batteries are progressing. We talked about Factorial Energy having a 745-mile battery. QuantumScape is targeting late decade production. The cost that I still have never really seen real solidly is where solid state costs are at. So that, people talk about that. There's obviously, you're going to have more energy density with solid state, but at what point do they end up being, economical or on par with other technologies? But that $52 for LFP and $59 for sodium ion, I mean, you're starting to get pretty cheap. You start talking about a megawatt battery pack, you're talking, less than $60,000 per megawatt on a battery pack at scale. And, that's a nice way to, arbitrage energy or to provide, storage for renewables.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's all I wanted to cover today. Folks, have a great weekend. We appreciate everybody chiming in. And I'll be back with Bill on Tuesday. Otherwise, everybody have a great weekend.